I think I've got my microphone on again. Thank goodness. Can't always trust me to know what I'm doing up here, by the way. Thank you. The second scripture reading for this morning comes to us from the 17th chapter of the Gospel according to Matthew, starting with the first verse through the 8th. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly there appeared with them Moses and Elijah talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice said, "This is my Son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. May God's guiding spirit and blessing continue to reside upon the experiences of Scripture on this day. May it guide the meditations of our hearts and the words of my lips. So I got up here the first service and I ended up going a different direction from the way I was planning. And that is the nature of change, isn't it? Right? Change is a transformation, it's a metamorphosis, it's a transfiguration. This idea of changing things, of being different from what we were. Up to this point in Jesus' ministry, in the Gospel of Matthew and in others, Jesus has been primarily doing the work of God in the greater Galilee. Northern part, the old kingdom of Israel. He's being engaged in not just proclaiming the realm of God come near, but doing the things of the realm. Healing and bringing wholeness, restoring people to their communities, feeding and encouraging people to share the feast. This moment, this transfiguration moment was going to bring about a change. We were getting ready to get into Lent. Lent is a season of preparation. So we are getting ready to prepare. Makes sense, right? We're getting ready to prepare. Jesus takes disciples up the mountain so that they can pay witness to this thing that is happening, this change that is taking place, this getting ready for this stretch of the journey. And this journey is going one way. Straight down the hill and rolling with ever greater force and inertia and speed to Jerusalem. This journey that Jesus is getting ready to embark on is going straight to the cross. We don't dare run past that moment. We don't dare jump ahead to the end. We can know it's there, but we are on a journey. And that journey is a journey of transformation that is taking place. When Jesus goes up the mountain, with his disciples, he is joined by 2 distinct prophets. And in Matthew's gospel, the prophets pay even more importance than they do in other gospels, because in Matthew's gospel, Jesus is straight out of Hebrew scripture. He is the fulfillment of. He is the one that is expected. Matthew really lifts up this idea. And the two prophets that show up there, they're agents of change. They are two individuals who themselves were transformed that they might take on a specific task for God. We should know about Moses. We've seen the movie. We know exactly how it works, right? Cecil B. DeMille. We know how it works. We get into the text, it works a little bit differently. But we know that Moses was raised as a prince of Egypt. We know that Moses had to flee for fear of his life. We know that Moses became a shepherd and that he had a God experience with a burning bush. We know that Moses was called for a task. To go and bring the people Israel, the nation, out of Egypt. To be as a midwife of sorts. And we know that in the process of doing this, he spent 40 days up on the mountain, having conversations with God in that thin space between God and the world. And when he came down, he shone. His face was brilliant. And he had tablets with him, which might invoke a memory of another movie. Here are your 15. 10 commandments. Again, the movie, not exactly as it is in the book. So Moses is the first priest and prophet of the people Israel. He is the one who receives the instructions that are going to make the community a community. He himself is changed and transformed. He goes through several sets of metamorphoses. Right? Sees, metamorphosai. Sees. Excellent. Thank you. Because I hate to stand up here and say metamorphoses. But he goes through several of these life-changing events, these God events, and he becomes a different sort of person. Now, we know that Moses, all the way through his life, still deals with being a fully human being. This is not, all of a sudden he becomes like God in ways that none of us can attain, but we know that he is changed, and the 40 days on the mountain are part of it. And then there's Elijah. Elijah, another great prophet from the history and time of the people Israel. He himself flees. He is on the run. And for 40 days, he travels on the run and ends up again on the mountain where God meets him. And where he has this theophany, this God experience and moment. And he is given a specific mission and a task to fulfill, that he might bring back around the people Israel, that they might be restored to a faith in God. And now Jesus, who's already spent 40 days in the wilderness in response to the work of the Spirit, goes up on the mountain with his disciples. And these two are there. They are present. The first priest and prophet, the great prophet. And Elijah was the first one whose set of wheels had flames down the side. Awesome. Growing up, that's all I wanted was a car with flames down the side. Ended up with a Corvair. It was perfectly safe and parked. But Elijah and Moses and Jesus there, and I'm sure they were talking about the specific mission, the specific aspect of the ministry that was getting ready to start. Jesus is preparing not only to go to the cross, but to go through the cross. And then God breaks in. And God says something that brings us back to the early part of the gospel. This is my son. This is my son. That's the same thing that God said when Jesus was baptized. So this moment of transformation, this moment of transfiguration, of glory abounding around Jesus, this change that takes place, we find when it happens, God reaches back into the past and pulls more of Jesus' life and history into this moment now. And so we ourselves, as we are transformed, whether it is over a 40-day window, whether it's in this exact moment, find that when we have gone through that experience of being changed and glowing like the glory of God itself, that God has reached back into our past and has claimed that whole thing and brings it into this moment right now, that we might be set aside for a specific task and mission and ministry. That we might go through a transfiguration. And we know that change is a constant. I was taught that. The only constant in life is change. That was my first lesson on not arguing with the teacher, because I lost badly. When we got up this morning, we found we were different than we were when we went to bed. We've all slept, hopefully. And if not, we'll get a nap soon. When we walked into this space on this morning, when we entered in and gathered together, we were different than what we were when we got up in the morning. And when we finish worshiping God in this house and in this space and we go to leave, we will find that we have been transformed yet again. We are a people of change. Being static is not an option for us. When Jesus goes up the mountain, and he encounters these two agents of incredible change in the life and times of the people of Israel, it is not only that he can receive a background on what they have gone through, but is an affirmation of the reality of change that is taking place. Metamorphosis. That God is a God of change. It's coming, and it is here. And we will find now as we go into Lent, starting on Wednesday, that we are in a 40-day period of intentional change, of transformation, of renewal. That we might dare to stand at the foot of the cross at the end of the journey and gaze into the brilliance, the glowing, beatific, divine brilliance of the one who called us up the mountain to begin with. Thanks be to God.